What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike. It's Dan back with a kind of a blast update video. I don't really honestly blast, I guess, because I'm just on year round. I was on 500 milligrams of Test E, 100 milligrams of Trenbolone E, and for quite a while, basically the entire time that I was traveling. So my cruises at this point, at this stage in the game, are ridiculous. I cruise at about 600 milligrams of gear pretty much year round at a minimum these days. And so when I say blasting, what I really mean is when I start increasing my androgens for the purposes of trying to either grow or go into a serious cut phase. Most of those, basically what I run year round is just for the purposes of sustaining all of the physiological functions that I'm looking for. So, Paul, do you need something? Okay. So that's where I started. 500 milligrams of Test E, 100 milligrams of Trenbolone E. Then, about 11, really more than 11 weeks ago, I upped I added in Masteron at 300 milligrams a week. I won't really get into all of the details of what happened there because I've made a number of videos. But basically, going back to the 11-week mark is when I sort of, for the sake of this video, started my blast. So I started at the 11-week mark. I was at 11 weeks ago, I was at 500 milligrams of Test E, 300 milligrams of Trenbolone E, and 300 milligrams of Masteron E. During the early phase of that cycle, the Trenbolone did to me what it typically does, and it absolutely cratered my appetite. I was going through some various other things, and so I had a starting weight of about right at 200 in the evening, and that was nice and lean, 6 very visible abs at 200, not carrying really a lot, if any, body fat around my abdomen, though admittedly my love handles and lower back, you could pinch a little adipose tissue back there. So when the trend started coming up in my system, my appetite went right in the fucking toilet and I started shedding weight rapidly. So in a relatively short period of time, I would say over the course of the first 2.5 weeks on this cycle, I dropped from 200 pounds in the evening to about 190, 192, I guess 190 in the morning was the lowest I got, so down to about 192 in the evening. And I just basically shed off all of all of my love handles and the weight in my lower back. And I have several shorts at the 190 mark. If you would like to see what my physique was looking like at that point in the cycle, you can go back and you can look at my shorts and you can see post-workout videos where I hit a few poses. I've never competed. My posing is trash. It's just for the sake of trying to show you, give you some feel as to what my body's looking like on a particular amount of androgens. So at about that point, I did what I always do, which is fucking panic, because I was sub 200 by a long shot. And the whole point of getting on all these androgens, honestly, was to try to bulk. And so I decided to experiment with MK677 as a methodology for increasing my appetite. At the same time, I also had been struggling with Crash E2. Again, I'm not going to go into the details of that. I had tinkered with my testosterone level and it was not enough to offset the Masteron, and I crashed my estrogen into the toilet and elected to remove all of the Arimidex from my protocol and try to rely on the Masteron alone as a SERM/AI. It's not an AI, but as a SERM. And what happened was, in the beginning, was all fun and games. So I added MK677. I started eating more food than I have ever eaten in my life. I had an unbelievable amount of just voracious appetite, craving things that I never crave, having so much enjoyment with food, and the fucking weight on the scale just started fucking going up like a rocket. And so I was like, wow, this is a fucking amazing drug. Let me get a Red Bull. So I gained like 10 pounds in a week. If I can't remember again, I have videos going into this. And when I started gaining weight so rapidly, I knew that something was fucking suspicious, because I don't at first I thought, well, maybe it's a little bit of rebound. But to summarize, so that we don't beat this to death, what actually happened was I took the Arimidex out of my mix. And so between the MK677 and my estrogen that started spiking meteorically, I just started throwing on giant amounts of water weight. And so I skyrocketed from 192 pounds in the morning, which was like fucking shrink wrap dice to the bone for me. 192 in the morning. In the course of the next 3 weeks or less, honestly, I think it was less than 3 weeks, I went from 190 in the morning, or 192 in the evening, to a high of 213.5 pounds in the evening. Now, from a purely psychological perspective, meaning from the perspective of I've never been that big in my entire life and I've always wanted to be that big, I was really feeling life. I was super excited to finally have eclipsed the 210 pound mark, but it was obvious just from looking at my body, and I've got progress updates in the form of video shorts where you can look at me at, like, 194, 196, 200, 204, like I documented all along the way. And if you watch in the documentation, you'll see the water go onto my shoulders. You'll see these cuts right here that this really bright light is not doing a good job of. Hang on a second. There, I warmed that light up a little bit. You can see the cuts in my shoulders, the vascularity. In those videos, you'll notice that all of my definition and just grainy, good aesthetic look to my body was rapidly disappearing as I was just throwing on gallons and gallons of water weight. So at the 213.5 mark, I was feeling good psychologically, but I was feeling like absolute shit physically. I mean, just getting out of bed was a struggle. I really felt the rapid weight gain just on my body. It didn't, moving around, walking around. I was out of breath a lot. I did not feel great at all. My face was getting really bloated, losing like the cuts in my face, and I was turning into a fucking water balloon. And then, as you know from following this channel, I found out that my estrogen had spiked into the fucking stratosphere when I started getting morning sickness, which is indicative of an E2 level well into the fucking 180s. So I made some quick adjustments and put my protocol back to those known factors that I was talking about. 500 milligrams of Test E with 3 milligrams of Arimidex per day, 300 milligrams of Tren E, which I have since raised to 350 milligrams of Tren E, and I kept the Mastron at 300 milligrams of Tren E. So that's basically where I was at when I left you. That is pretty much a synopsis of this cycle up until this point. Now, finally moving forward, where are we at today? Today, my body, the water weight on my frame has finally gotten to where it's going to be at this given amount of estrogen in my system. Based on my sexual response, I can tell that my E2 is still on the high, on the slightly high end. It is likely high normal. Very possibly in the top end of the range. It could be a slight hair above it because I am extremely fucking horny all day long, which is consistent with having E2 slightly on the high end of the range. And I'm still not quite as dry as I get when my E2 is down, like, where I like it to be, which is like right in the middle of the range. There's a lot more pec separation. There's less fullness to my pecs. I'm actually enjoying the fullness to my chest. And I haven't been to the gym in 3 days now. I've had some shit going on. So I'm enjoying having a little bit more fullness to my body, but there's admittedly slightly more intracellular water than I would normally carry around when I have my E2 knocked down a little bit lower than it currently is. So about a week and a half ago, give or take, I added into the mix 50 milligrams of Anadrol per day. That has come on in full force as we speak. Last night I was sitting in the bed with my wife and she was like, are you okay? Like, you seem really, like, I don't know. And I was like, homicidal? And she's like, yeah, kind of. And I said, well, I fucking feel homicidal. It occurred to me last night that this is actually the first time that I've run Trenbolone and Anadrol together at these doses. And I am definitely feeling the psychological effects. Usually when I've run Anadrol in the past, it's been on one of my little Tren cruises. So I think the maximum amount of Tren that I've ever run alongside Anadrol was 100 milligrams of Tren, 50 milligrams of Anadrol, if I remember correctly. And so 50 milligrams of Anadrol, 350 milligrams of Tren, 500 milligrams of Test, 300 milligrams of Masteron is a good, healthy cycle for me psychologically, and I'm definitely feeling some of the agitation that you would expect to come along with those particular doses. I'm feeling a tremendous amount of aggression in the gym. My strength is markedly increased, and my endurance in the gym is very good, to the point where I'm having to force myself to leave the gym because I'm not eating enough calories to sustain lengthy workouts. I think I got sidetracked when I was talking about the estrogen. So my body weight has stabilized now. For the past week, I have been stable at right about 207 pounds in the evening, and that could be up or down from there by about, usually 207 is about the floor. I think the highest that I've seen in the last week is 207.8. So from a high of 213.5 at full-blown water balloon status to have only dropped down to 207.8, give or take, pounds in the evening, I'm actually very happy with that. I am not as lean, I do not believe, as I was at 200, so I'm not prepared to say that these have been that these are fat-free gains. So this is what my abs are looking like right now at 207, which is very comparable to 200, but my abs can be very misleading. So while my abs may look pretty fucking diced, I mean, they're pretty visible. They're not like diced, but they're very visible. My abs, unfortunately, are not a good way of telling how much body fat I have in my frame, because it creeps around in my love handles and my lower back. I would say that I am in striking distance of the condition that I was in at 200. I think it is safe to say that I could cut slightly down to, say, 205 in the evening, and I would be at the condition that I was at 200. If that is the case, then thus far on this cycle, I'm looking at possibly a 5-pound contractile gain, which, if I end up keeping that long term, I will be very happy with those results. I consider myself to be at basically the half point right now. So at 11 weeks, I'm at maybe the halfway point of this cycle. I am waiting for my DECA to arrive. I don't know what the fuck the holdup is. QSC has been very good to me. I know that they've had their Lunar New Year going on recently. I'm hoping that has led to backups in their shipping process. My plan is to, going forward, is that once the DECA arrives, I have just decided, no matter what anybody tells me, that I just want to know what happens when you run Tren DECA. I had originally planned on running Boldenone, Equipoise, and they were out of stock. So I'm gonna have to save that for a upcoming experiment. So the plan currently is this. When the DECA arrives, I'm going to stop taking the Anadrol whenever that occurs. And I'm going to pin 300 milligrams of DECA. I'm going to start at 300 milligrams of DECA. So the cycle is going to look like 500 milligrams of Test E, 350 milligrams of Trenbolone E, 300 milligrams of Masteron E, and 300 milligrams of DECA. So, I almost said DECA E, dumbass. So DECA. So, a mediocre fucking dose. What is that? That's 500, 800, was that 1,500 milligrams? I think. I can't remember if I missed something there. It's a decent little moderate amount of gear to be running on a single cycle. But I want to know for my own sake what that combination of compounds feels like, how my body reacts to it, how I react to it psychologically. And so I'm going to run it and see what happens. For those of you who are going, what? Test, DECA, Tren, Masteron, why the fuck would you possibly use that combination of gear? Again, without going into all the details, I don't run gear in the conventional way that bodybuilders run gear. I know that bodybuilders typically do cutting cycles or bulking cycles, and what I'm proposing is some combination of the two. I fully understand that. But that is because of the fact that due to the fact that I'm on year fucking round, I have a lot of psychological and physiological issues that I have to mediate for. So I'm keeping the Masteron in the system because it keeps my nipples looking good and it provides me the upbeat, happy, sort of anti-Tren psychological aspect that I need. It's also very, very positive for my libido, and it keeps me looking dry. And so Masteron and Tren together, I think, produce a phenomenal fucking, aesthetic. So obviously nobody's going to argue with that part. What I think some people might argue is, then why would you throw in a wet compound like DECA? Well, because I don't fucking think DECA is a wet compound. I know, like, people are like, fucking Test and DECA are wet compounds. Yeah, they can be, if you're an idiot, honestly. If you take Test and DECA and you don't manage your estrogen, then you have a wet compound. You have a compound that's going to put a lot of body water on your frame. They're not wet compounds for me because I knock my fucking estrogen down low enough that I don't retain water. So I have a video on my channel, what it's like to do Test and DECA, I think. And I've got progress pictures all the way through that video. It's one of my more popular videos where I showed that at no point in the entire fucking cycle did I ever get anything even approaching moon face, water bloating, water retention, edema. DECA absolutely does not have to be a wet fucking compound if you realize that it does aromatize into estrogen. It's a very fucking low rate, and that's completely dependent on your particular biochemistry. And so if you stay on top of your blood work and you just monitor the way you look and feel, it's really not that goddamn difficult to do DECA and not turn into a water balloon. So I fully expect that I will be able to do that again on this cycle. The make or break point is going to be prolactin, which brings me back to my next point. I usually take a quarter milligram of cabergoline every other day to offset the effects of Trenbolone at 300 milligrams a week. Which apparently is really the minimum. It's not really quite enough for me. I've talked about this in a previous video. And so when I bumped it up to 350 milligrams, as I said in my last video, I went into the depths of a serious fucking depression due to a rise in prolactin and being, I think, just at that point in the cycle. It's not terribly uncommon for me around the week 8 or 9 mark to get a bit doom and gloom. And so I have since increased my cabergoline dose. So I upped my cabergoline dose from 0.75 milligrams per week to about 1 1/4 milligrams of cabergoline per week, which was enough to get me out of that depressed state that I was experiencing on the higher dose of trenbolone. Then, of course, like a fucking idiot, what did I do? I added in Anadrol, which started antagonizing the progesterone receptor as well, and I've noticed a return in the uptick of sort of the brooding, depressed kind of negative thought processes, and so I have increased my cabergoline again. Now, this was actually intentional. Before some of you start going, what the fuck is this guy doing? I am a chemistry experiment. I'm not telling anybody to do this with their body. What I'm doing to myself is probably catastrophically fucking stupid. I'm just doing it because I like to experiment. And since it's illegal for me to experiment on anybody else, I experiment on myself. And so taking Tren and Anadrol together, I am now having to take at least 1.5 milligrams, possibly more than that, of cabergoline to keep the prolactin side effects away. I started the Anadrol knowing that it was going to increase my prolactin, because I know that when I add the Deca to the mix, it's also going to increase my prolactin. And so in this fairy tale diluted world that I live in, I thought, hey, let's go ahead and put in a drug that's going to increase your prolactin, so you can start dialing in the necessary prolactin, the cabergoline dose to offset it, so that when you drop the Anadrol and stick in the Deca, you'll already have a sufficient amount of anti-prolactin cabergoline drug in your system, and hopefully you won't get sucked back into the roller coaster ride that I'm sure is going to be Tren and Deca combined. So that's why I went ahead and added the Anadrol now, because I wanted to start tinkering with my prolactin before the Deca even gets on the scene. So when the Deca arrives on the scene, I take the fucking Anadrol out, I put the Deca in at 300 milligrams. Hopefully the dose of cabergoline that I'm already on at that point will give me a nice level playing field to work from. It may not. The good news about prolactin is it is not fraught with the same disasters that come from fucking with your estrogen. So if my prolactin dose is off, if my cabergoline dose is off, worst case scenario, I'll get depressed and have Decadic. If my dose is too low, if I don't take enough cabergoline, I'll get depression and Decadic. And if I take too much cabergoline, then I will have weakened orgasms and like 0 refractory period, and I'll be trying to fuck my wife bow-legged. So either way, it's not like catastrophic. You know, on the one hand, it's just lots of sex until I dial it in. And on the other hand, it's just, you know, I might go into the woods and shoot myself, but, you know, hey, no big deal there, right? So, but really, generally, I'm making light of something that's not funny, but the reality is, generally with prolactin, it's not going to be a relationship-ending scenario if I fuck it up one way or the other. Where with the estrogen, it's either we're getting divorced or I'm vomiting every single day and miserable and want to die. That's like the range of estrogen effects in my body. Whereas with prolactin, it's either my dick works or it doesn't. And so it's not the end of the deal. It's not the end of the world, because my wife has plenty of toys to fill in for me when I'm not having my A game, which happens. So that's much easier to cope with, which is why I don't like fucking with anything that has to do with estrogen. I'm more than happy to play with my prolactin dose. Now, I am aware that I could have some estrogen problems. I'm aware of this. I am aware that it could get high again because of the fact that when I add the Deca does aromatize to some degree. So, because I'm feeling a little high at the moment, I'm considering adding in 0.5 milligram of Arimidex at about the 4-week mark of the Deca cycle if I'm feeling like I'm starting to become symptomatic of high estrogen. I don't foresee this getting way out of control, but who knows? I could be making another video in 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks telling you that the vomiting has returned. There's just absolutely no telling. What I suspect is possibly going to be the biggest problem of all running these two compounds together is going to be the psychological load that the two 19-nor compounds are going to have on me. I have read a number of reports about guys having very negative psychological effects to combining 19-nor drugs, and the side effects that they report, like extreme obsessive compulsive problems, issues that mirror like being strung out on amphetamines, a lot of sympathetic drive, a lot of anxiety. These sound like things that could very well be right up my fucking alley. It sounds like if I was going to be prone to something, that's the kind of thing I might be prone to. So, since I've been on Tren for 11 weeks now, I'm not really married to it for the foreseeable future. I'm going to try to run Deca alongside Tren for a minimum of 3 to 4 weeks to get a good solid feel of what the two compounds feel like together. But I have promised my wife that when I combine these two compounds, if I start going in the fucking toilet psychologically, and it's not something that I can fix by tinkering with my cabergoline dose, if the psychological weight of the two 19-nors is too uncomfortable, then I'm going to drop the Tren back to probably 100 fucking milligrams a week and either leave the Deca where it is or increase it. So I'm definitively on this cycle, unless something changes in a major way, going to give Deca its last fair day in court. I've tried to run this compound, including MPP, on more than one occasion, and I did not like the way it felt. But that was before I figured out how to use cabergoline to offset the prolactin issues. So I feel like I have unfairly judged nandrolone, and so I'm going to do my best to find out if there is a way to tame it in the same way that I have tamed the trenbolone. And because my son, who just turned 13, has decided that he wants to go to the gym, and because we can't leave our daughter alone by ourselves, I've gone from working out 3 to 4 days a week to working out fucking 6 days a week, because I go, my wife works out 3 days a week. So we're basically alternating. So my son and I go, then my wife and I go, then my son and I. So my joints are getting fucking hammered into oblivion, and I could really use the support at my old age that Deca will provide in trying to maintain a 6 to 7 day training protocol. I have been feeling the weight of that already. And so that is the other big reason that I'm really wanting to stick Deca in to the mix, is that I don't think I'm going to be able to maintain that level of intensity without it. So that's where we stand today. I'm feeling very, very good right now, psychologically and physically. Everything in my body is firing in exactly the way it should. If I had one complaint, I would say that I'm still possibly a little high on the prolactin level due to the increase with the Anadrol, so I'm trying to dial that in. As soon as I start the Deca, I will definitely update you guys as to the starting date. And if any other issues should arise, then I will try to be as transparent with that as I can be. Other than that, not a lot to report. You know, when you run compounds as high as I do for as long as I do, you know, like in the past, running this much gear, I think I would have really been fucking feeling it. And it's surprising how much the body can really just adapt to whatever you do to it. And the majority of the time, I don't even really feel like I'm on cycle. And then somebody will say something on some social media platform like the other night, and I was fucking absolutely homicidal in the blink of a fucking eye. And so it's like all of those androgens are just humming under the surface, just waiting for somebody to fucking set them off. Which is a good thing. You know, the reality is where I've got myself dialed into right now, I can function around the house. I'm not pegged out all day. I can, you know, play with the family, do things with the kids, the wife, go shopping, go out to dinner. Everything is fine. But when I get to the gym, it comes on. If somebody threatens me or somebody tries to come at me, it comes on. And so it's almost like I've figured out a way to tame these compounds so that I have literally put a throttle on them, and I can kind of keep them, you know, keep the RPMs low for the vast majority of the time, and then when I need it, we can fucking downshift and rev up the engine and fucking get up and go. And that's really the ideal circumstance that you'd be looking for, especially running compounds that are this psychoactive. So there you have it. You know, I'm sure I've rambled on way too far here. Somebody in the comments was complaining there hasn't been enough content lately. And so here's some fucking content for you. So where we're at currently, 350 milligrams of Tren E, 50 milligrams per day of Anadrol, 300 milligrams per week Masteron E, 500 milligrams per week Testosterone E, 3 milligrams per week of Arimidex. We're going to call it 1.5 milligrams per week of cabergoline. I am taking 7.5 milligrams of Zopiclone along with 10 milligrams of Ambien to sleep at night. My battery is about to fucking die per usual. I am taking 160 milligrams of telmisartan, Cialis, Xanax, you name it, I'm taking it. And we're about to add Dex to the mix as soon as it arrives. So there you have it. As always, thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.